Hello, this is Michelle. Today we're going to paint a Bootiful night for a stroll. We're painting this on an 11 by 14 inch canvas, and our brushes are going to be, I like mostly golden Taklon, so we're going to be using several small rounds I like to have handy for grasses and small areas. We're going to use a 1 inch flat for the background, and the filbert and the scruffy brush I didn't end up using, but the 1/2 inch flat I did. Our colors are Blick acrylics, and they're Mars Black, Phthalo Blue, and Titanium White. We're going to start the background by adding a little Phthalo Blue and then mixing our blue and black on the plate, creating like a navy blue. So having that little bit of phthalo at the top gives us some blue to kind of brush down into the evening sky. And we're just going to paint this diagonally like I'm doing here. And you just want it to be nice and smooth to avoid brush strokes. And I'm going to demonstrate here what happens if you stop and start. You create little brush strokes. So if you have to do that to first get the paint on, you want to come back with a swooping motion from off the canvas to avoid having all those little brush strokes in your background or anything that you're painting. So here you go from off canvas to off canvas as I'm demonstrating. I'm also going to speed this background work up a little bit so you won't get bored. So here, if you make, I'm showing little brush stroke marks, you don't want to do that. You want to run from off canvas to off canvas. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to continue that, and I'm going to speed up the video here. We're going to finish the front in those dark colors, and when we get finished with the blue and black, we're going to start adding little bits of white to make a moon glow. Okay. All right, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to take a little bit of white, and my brush is still dirty. If you have a lot of paint on your brush, before you get the white, wipe your brush off a little bit. So we don't want the white to be bright. We just want a subtle moonbeam type of glow. Okay, so you can do as much or as little as you want. Now this is a wet paper towel. I'm going to wet it, squeeze it out, and then I'm going to shake it out, and I scrunch it almost like to a little rosebud shape, as you'll see here. So here I'm shaking it out, and I'm going to let it kind of fall into my hand and kind of pinch it, and it has a little rosebud look. I'm going to dip into a little bit of that blue that's super thin on the plate. And then I'm going to grab some white. And so we're going to have a lighter blue. And we don't want a lot of paint at one time. You'll see I use very little. And I'm just kind of tapping and rubbing a little bit, or a little smoosh. And what we're doing is we're just creating a little bit of glow around where the ghost will be. You can also trace your ghost on first if you prefer to see exactly where the ghost is before you do this. That's totally a matter of preference. I just did the glowing in the outer edge, and then I added the ghost with white transfer paper. So I'm just gently patting and smooshing, scooching, smushing, whatever word you want to use. Technical terms, all technical terms. Haha. Anyway, get a little bit more white, and you'll see I'm adding little bits of blue because I don't want it super strong. And I'm just patting and smushing a little bit and just kind of dancing my hand around there and just making like a misty glow. If you get it more white than you want, the white does tend to fade into the background as it dries, but you could also just go back in with a little bit of blue or blue and black if need be. Now right over here I'm going to get some more white and blue, and I'm going to make some horizontal lines across the bottom by lightly skimming that paper towel, and that's going to create like a base for the little ghost to stand on. So I tapped a little bit of the paint off, and now I'm going back in and just adding a little bit more of the glow. It's so much fun to see how this develops when you watch it on the video. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is get our pattern on. So here it is with our pattern, and I'm going to show you how we're going to start creating the ghost. Now in the folds where we would want it to be shadowed, I'm not adding paint. I'm using kind of a dry brush effect. So I'm going to take the 1/2 inch flat and white paint, and I'm going to start on the edges that are foremost and crisp and that we want to be white. So I'm going to start on the left hand side. And at first I started to go inward with my brush stroke, but that's not really the direction that I want it to look like it's flowing, so I changed it to vertical here. But it's a good base like this, and then you want to start doing a vertical stroke once you get your edge in. So see, I'm doing a vertical stroke, and I'm doing a very light touch as it comes down. It's more of a dry brush effect than anything. So you want your brush to be able to leave the canvas in motion, so it's almost like a flick or a lifting when you get close to where we want it to be shadowed. And you can reference your photo to see where those shadows are, and you'll see it start to come together here. And again, I make the edges nice and bright with white, and then as I come in, I use less pressure on the brush, and I put less paint on because I want to leave the navy blue and black showing as part of the shadowing for this adorable ghost. Okay, now I'm turning it upside down to get those edges nice and crisp, to identify the edge of the folds in the ghost. So you can have a lot of paint on those edges, but then as you come in, you use less pressure and you let the brush lift off the canvas in motion. So in other words, you're not stopping your brush stroke with the full pressure of the brush down, you're letting it come up. So here I'm doing a lot more of the dry brush. So now I'm using a little bit of the blue plus the white, and I'm adding some of that color in the ghost there, and we'll be going back over with some white also. And as I come down, my brush is running out of paint. Here I'm identifying another fold, or the edge of the gown. And I'm just letting the brush kind of dry brush what's left on it. Now for the dry brushing, you might want to use an older brush because you will wear a brush down from this method, but you do need it crisp for your edges. So you can either, use the one brush, or you can swap back and forth between if you prefer. Just remember, acrylic paint dries really quickly in brushes. So here I am, and you'll notice a lot of that dark blue-black background is showing through the white, especially in all the folds where I'm not really adding any paint or so little because my brush is just skimming that area. And it's what creates the effect of this really cute ghost. I love this method of painting. It takes a little practice sometimes, but it's so worth it. Okay, so here I am coming up on another of the folds. And from the bottom, I'm just pulling the brush up. And you can see that it's kind of dry in the middle. I'm not putting a whole lot of paint there. So this is like light layers that you continue to build up. If you put too much paint at one time, you might be rushing the process, but you won't have the same effect in the end, which is fine. You know, if you want to do solid painting and then come back in with shading and highlighting, of course that's fine too. But for this dry brush method, you really just want to take your time and enjoy the process and just watch it, you know, come to shape. Step away from it once in a while or look at it through the lens of your cell phone camera, and it shows you, it kind of shows you pretty clearly how it's looking if you can't see it just looking at the painting. And we're just going to keep building this up. And I even come back in later on the ghost with a little bit of paper toweling, so you know, you might want to watch the whole video before you continue. It's up to you. I'm coming down the side, and on the head I'm pulling downward. I turn it upside down when the edge that I want is at the bottom, because you don't want to have to twist your hand all around upside down to paint. You want to move your canvas. At least that's what I like. I have more control that way, and I get a crisp edge where I want one. So I'm just pulling up. I did not trace the basket on. I just drew it freehand, so it might look a little bit different than the tracer, but I wanted to get the ghost completely painted before I had the basket on, because I wanted to shade a little behind it, or the tote, the satchel, whatever you want to call that he's carrying. Again, lots of dry brushing there. You see how that's developing and how nice that looks. Okay, so now I'm going to grab a little bit more white paint, and we're going to create that arm by painting in the outside edge of it, and then letting the brush just sort of run out of paint as it goes up, lifting it off in motion so it's like a flick at the end. You could add more folds in this pattern if you wanted to. Just remember the inside of the fold stay dark, and the outside of the fold, which identifies the fold, gets brighter. I'm going to try to make that right side a little bit brighter, because I feel like that's where our light source is coming from. The moon is way up there. We didn't paint a moon in this painting, but that little bit of white glow that we put in is coming from that angle. So again, I'm kind of dry brushing in there. If you find that when you're adding paint, if you're lifting up what's under it, just let it dry or blow dry it a little bit before you continue. Sometimes the paint's trying to dry and it gets cranky if we keep stroking over it. Here we go, that's looking good. So we want to brighten up that arm and bring it out in front of the body. Okay, that's giving us our dimension and our depth. Super cute, looking cute. Okay, so I just fluffed a little more. There was hardly any white in the brush, and I was just adding a little bit more glow there with what was left in that brush. Okay, now I'm going to paper towel a little. So I got a little bit of white on my towel, and I'm just rubbing it onto the dirty paper towel so that there's a little bit of blue with it. And I started to put some glow here, and it was a little brighter than I wanted, so I just used a clean end of the paper towel to kind of lighten that a little bit. And I do use it on the ghost in a little bit. So one thing about white, and I teach it in all my videos, when you're using white as a highlight, it does tend to fade into your background, and 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, I come back in and I add more white as it's drying. When I'm teaching in the studio, white is the color that I buy the most of because we use it in all our paintings. So here I'm just adding a little more white to that ground. Okay, like I said, we're going to come in and we're going to be adding more white on those edges, which pops it even more forward from the shaded areas. It makes all the difference to take the step to do that. You can see how that's developing. I'm going to add some more white up here and feather it down. Notice I'm getting some white and I'm touching the brush to the paper towel before I go to my canvas because I don't want to have too much white at one time. I'd rather have to keep going back in and adding it. Super cute. Now let's turn it upside down and get those edges a little more crisp with some white. Again, not bringing it to the shadowed areas, but leaving it bright on the edge. You can blend it in up on the head area. And then down there at the bottom. So cute. I enjoyed painting this one for you so much. In fact, I think it's prompted me to create a series of little ghosts, so stay tuned. At least another one for this year. But I see myself adding to the collection year after year. Okay, looking good. Now I have the round brush and I wet it in the water, and I'm taking some black and some blue. And we're going to start working on the hat. So I'm doing just the brim at the moment. I'm going to paint that entire brim. And then the little top portion of the hat, I'll do more in the blue. And of course you can change this up however you'd like. Get around your edges as carefully as you can. You can use a flat or a smaller flat if you prefer. Just remember, when you use a round brush, it can create more brush strokes because you're working with a small point, and just be careful to smooth out your paint so you won't have ridges. I always try to get my paint smoothed out. I don't really like ridges in my paint. Okay, once that's to your satisfaction, oops, I slipped a little bit there. We'll get some more black on there. And then you can either wipe that brush off or rinse it depending how much paint you have on it. And you're going to get mostly blue. And you're going to do the top portion of the hat. And you can add little bits of white to your blue also. So cute. When we get his little eyes in there, then he comes to life, so to speak. He is a ghost after all. Okay. I'm just touching up that brim. Just trying to make it as perfect as I can. I like to have crisp edges. Of course, you don't have to keep it with crisp edges. If you want a more rustic look, that's fine too. Make it yours. Have fun with it. Okay. I'm cleaning out that brush. And I want to have a darker area underneath the ghost to create, you know, that space under there, like he's kind of floating above the ground. So I'm putting in some black, and I'm just tapping it in and just letting it, I'm sort of lifting the brush off as I get down to the bottom too, and just kind of dry brushing it into the ground below. So that gives him a shadow underneath, and it makes it look more like he's actually above that ground. Gives it a much better look. A little bit more black. And then just kind of brush it down. I'm going to wipe some of that black off and then just kind of dry brush it into the rest of the ground, lifting the brush off, lifting the pressure off as I come down. That looks great. Love it. I like the edging of the black to be kind of soft and not a hard crisp line down there. That's why I end up with a dry brush when I'm at the end of that stroke. Okay, now I'm rinsing out that brush. And underneath the arm, I want to put a little shadow of mostly blue. And it's just a little subtle shadow. The basket's going to go above it. And I'm adding a little bit on the left side too. Not too much. Sometimes your finger is the best blender that you have. And we're just going to dry brush a little bit more with whatever's left in that brush. I'm just skimming it over the ghost. Okay. I'm making sure that that's soft there. Getting some white. And I'm just going back in wherever the areas are a little darker than I want them to be, and I'm adding a little bit more white. right here, I'm just adding a little bit more shadow with the blue and black, and then a little bit in the front of the arm. Like I said, this is a process of kind of back and forth, what I call a dance, back and forth with your color. And we're just going to rub that dry brush a little bit in there, creating a shadow around the arm. Okay. Now I'm grabbing the paper towel and scrunching it up again, and I'm taking a little bit of white, touching it on my other paper towel so that I don't have too much, and I'm going to come in and just kind of tap a little bit more white on that ghost. Again, this paper towel is not very wet at this point, and there's not very much white paint, but it's helping to give it a little bit of color, just like we did in the glow in the sky. Just adding a little bit more white here. Now, if you accomplished that all with your dry brush, you don't have to do this step. I just want it a little brighter to the right where the moonlight is, and then I'm going to come down and just make it just a little bit brighter. I really like that. Okay, just a little tiny bit more. I rub it on the plate so there's not much. I either rub it on the plate or touch it on the paper towel, and I'm just skimming that on there, adding a little brightness. There we go. Okay, just a tiny bit more. Okay, so as soon as you're satisfied with that, you can go ahead and you can trace or freehand draw the basket on, and the eyes, which are ovals, which you can either paint in or use the handle of a brush or the tip of a pencil, and you can wiggle that to fill in your oval. If you use that method, you need to have a little puddle of paint. So you'll see when we get to that part. So I'm going ahead and clean up that brush, and like I said, this is one of those projects with just patience and going back and forth, but the end result is amazing. I just relax and enjoy the process on these kind of paintings, and I love to watch them develop right in front of my eyes. It's so much fun, isn't it? Okay, just going to make it a little brighter on that side because that's where our moon is. Remember also, you can fast forward through these parts or put your speed up on the video. I don't want to do that in the recording because I want those that really want to see every step have the ability to. So, it's your preference. You can speed up your own machine, stop it and start it whenever you want. All right, looking good. So I drew the basket by hand. So I have the white pencil there, and I put in a little handle, and then I created sort of a rounded square there, but this is on your tracer. So at this point you can dry your painting and put it on with some graphite paper if you desire, or you can just draw it like this. And I'm going to be making it blue. You could always use another color if you'd like, but I'm going to be using phthalo blue and black and white to create all the dimension on this. So you see I'm grabbing a little black and a little blue, and I'm going to just paint the main part of the little satchel. Sorry for getting my head in the picture. Okay. And then I'm going to be adding little bits of blue and white toward the right where I want it to be highlighted. And around the back side, I'll make it darker. And the left side of the front will be made a little bit lighter too. So you can see I'm adding the blue and white there on the right hand side and just kind of blending it in. It's subtle, but it's enough to give it shape. Okay, and then I'm going to grab just a little bit more of the white and put that in there and just kind of blend it in. So the left is shadowed with black and blue, and then I'm grabbing just a little lighter color by adding a little white, and I'm defining the front edge of the left, because the back, you can kind of see the side of it, how it goes around the back. You can zoom in there and take a closer look if you'd like. Okay, then we're going to create the handles, which I made darker, so you can use the blue and black together. And I just made two little curved lines that created the handle. Again, just identifying that left side. Super cute. Then I'm going to make I wanted to make it look like candies, so I did a circle with like little lines coming out to make it look like it was a candy that was wrapped in cellophane with twisted ends, and it ended up kind of looking more like the grass, the flowers in the grass. So you know, you could do whatever you want. You could make little tiny candy corns in there, little flowers, whatever you think. Here I'm highlighting with just a little bit of white, just a tiny bit so it's not super strong, highlighting the top of the hat and the top of the brim just to kind of bring it up in front of the sky area. Just subtle. So the eyes, where I was pointing that the eyes will be up at the top and there'll be ovals. And I'm just straightening out the little basket. In the buildup of lights and darks are what makes your painting have dimension and shape. So you can paint with less of that. You know, you could paint this little basket, satchel, whatever you want to call it, one color if you prefer to keep it really simple. But I do like to add shading and highlighting. So now I'm going to put that brush in the water and take back out the 1/2 inch flat, rinse it out a little bit. Oh no. Yes, it is the flat. Okay, so now I'm going in and I'm adding blue and white, and I'm adding a little bit more ground. Now that we have the dark under the ghost, we can add some more ground as long as you leave that dark under it. Okay, I'm going to add just a little bit more white, and I'm going to make some grasses with a little bit of blue and white. And I don't want much to show under the ghost because it's supposed to be dark under there. So if anything, we'll put some little dark strokes and just make some little grasses there. Now I have the round brush. And I'm just going to pull in some black grasses. I'm going to go through some of the white ones also. Just make the grass just kind of sparse and let the different colors show through. Super cute. Make your grasses different heights, and then we're just going to gently just sort of barely tap in some little black dots to make some flowers down there and a little bit on the other side. So here's our grasses, and then we're just going to gently tap. We're not banging the brush or ruining the bristles. We're just gently tapping it and making some black flowers there. Okay, a few grasses. Now I'm adding blue and black again. Just a few more grasses underneath the ghost. Little teeny ones. I'm going in and adding a little bit more blue and white underneath just to brighten that a little bit more. And notice that as I come down, I'm not making it quite as wide. I want it a little brighter up at the top, not so bright under the ghost, more toward the right. I'm going to make some blue and white on our round brush, and we're going to just add some little tiny dotted flowers in there in that white, plus a little blue, or you can keep it completely white if you like. And then sorry, I jumped there, but I finished the white flowers and then I started to put the eyes on. Now I was just using a pencil tip, and you notice there's a puddle of black paint on my plate, and I'm just getting enough on to move the color around. And honestly, using a brush handle or a pencil tip is usually easier than trying to paint it in with a brush, but certainly use your favorite method. And it looks like I painted in the candies, and somehow I lost that in the video also. So right there, they're just little circles with little lines coming out of them. If you zoom in close up, you'll see. And I think they could just be little flowers that he picked up on the trail. I think that's our best bet for that. right. Just getting those eyes just perfected a little bit. Now I'm just adding in some little flowers there with some white, and then I'm going to add a little white highlight in each eye. I'm going to add some stars. I'm using a pencil tip and I'm turning it different ways so that I'm not trying to make perfect circles or really bright ones, because you know the stars in the sky, some are brighter than others, so I want it to look a little bit natural even though it's fun. So of course you can do big bright stars if that's your preference. Okay. And put in that little highlight I was talking about. Okay. So when I highlight eyes, I either put the highlights both to the right or both to the left, so it doesn't look cross-eyed. Okay, it's looking really cute. And I believe the only thing left is to sign your masterpiece. So I usually use a color that's in the painting. So whoops, and there's one of the smaller brushes, and I'm just going to use some of the darker color. And I'm adding in black, and I'm adding in a little bit of the blue and white. I'm just making a lighter version of the sky. And I'm just going to put my MM in the corner, holding that brush nice and straight up. And I will paint the edges of this painting in black, and it will look super cute like that. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I think this little guy is super cute, and it's a great size that you can fit anywhere. There's your close-ups. All right. Thank you for watching.